Dear learners on the platform of MOOCs, I am Professor Nafis Ahmed Ansari from Department of Political Science of Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Today lecture we will talk about the ombudsman system in Sweden. An ombudsman is a government appointed representative who looks into complaints, typically from the public, against companies, banks, government agencies, or other public bodies. They also try to mediate disputes or redressals issues by offering suggestions or mediations among them. In 1809, so the official founding of the Swedish Ombudsman institution. The ombudsman may use various strategies such as pressuring the legislature to address misconduct, making an unfair judgment public, or bringing the issues to their attention. The ombudsman appointed the legislative assembly and handled civil affairs. The plan was to create a separate entity independent of the executive and judiciary branches and empowered to interfere in the specifics of any administrative actions upon a complaint of maladministration from any public member. At times, he may even bring charges against the ministers themselves. Things we evolved, and while that does not frequently do so, the Swedish ombudsman can now act as a public persecutor. After Scandinavian nations adopted the ombudsman institutions, several other nations, including New Zealand, United Kingdom, United States of America, Portugal, Israel, Australia, and Netherlands, and many more, began establishing these institutions after 1950s. The name ombudsman, though it is truly has a wider connotations, here refers to a person chosen by the parliament to monitor state and local government operations and make sure that the government agencies carry out their legal representatives. By looking into complaints from government, citizens, and the government, the ombudsman protects the rights of the people as well. The paper first traces the institution's historical growth from its founding in 809 and then describes current Swedish structure, which assigns specific areas of oversight to each of the four designated justice ombudsmen. The freedom of press, the legal system, and the treatment of offenders, the military forces, health care, foreign administration, religions, the environment taxes, social welfare, and the treatment of government employees are just a few of the many areas that fall under the purview of the ombudsman. The right to pursue criminal charges or disciplinary actions against public officials deemed to be at fault in one of the processes the ombudsman use while looking into complaints and administering supervision. In the light of the institution's efficacy, the demonstrating its impact on like agencies across institutional borders. Appended are pertinent sections from Swedish status and laws and complaints cases that ombudsmen have handled, an organizational diagram showing the office's structure, and over 40 references. Following his nearly 13-year stay in Turkey in 1713, King Charles XII government collapsed. In order to carry out proper governance, he established the Supreme Ombudsman. This person is in a charge of ensuring that everyone, include judges and the general public, performs their duties and complies with the law as it is being applied. Five women have been elected to the role since 1941, repeal of the law prohibiting only men from serving ombudsman. In 1957, the parliamentary ombudsman received the power to supervise local government. entities. In 1975, the special rights to undergo prosecution was established in tandem with a reform of official accountability that included a substantial degree in public officials' legal liabilities, among other things. It was determined that in this case the parliamentary ombudsman immunity from persecution was no longer required. Rather, the ombudsman had to adhere to the same guidelines that previously been applicable to the public prosecutors with regard to prosecution, and other opinions to not to persecute while conducting case inquiry. After more than 150 years as a key institution of Swedish democracy, the position of Special Parliamentary Commissioner for the Judiciary and the Civil Administration is finally attracting attention from throughout the world. An analogous establishment was established in 1915 to serve Swedish military matters. However, no analogous offences was established in any other nation until the conclusion of the World War I. Established 2 years prior to the former Swedish regions lost to the Russian empires in 1809, the newly formed Finnish Republic initiated the civil ombudsman in 1919. However, the office did not play a significant role in the public discourse surrounding the defense of civil rights and the relationship between the individuals and the state until after the violent upheavals that shook the West during the World War II. The debates led to the adopting a Boltzmann positions in Denmark in 1954 and its impending adoption in Norway, which has already established a comparable institutions to the military ombudsman. Germany, which established the special commissioner for military affairs post, has received suggestions from similar offices. There is a procurators in the Soviet Union, and each of its member republics whose duties include overseeing the administration. There are rumors that an office is operating roughly similarly in Indonesia. Therefore, it is appropriate to examine the characteristics of the Swedish institutions that served as the model for the current development. The Swedish Constitution 1809, which aimed to uphold freedom under the law, was influenced by the Montesquieu, which were then widely accepted in progressive circles in the Western world, established the office of civil ombudsman. Montesquieu and the division of authorities. Swedish constitution in 1809 partially implemented the Montesquieu theory of separation of powers. The framers of that constitution declared in their justification statement that their goal had to be establish a judicial power independent under the laws but no dominant over them, a legislative power wisely avoiding haste in action but firm and strong in resistance, and a governing power active within predetermined forms. The states of realm established the office of ombudsman as a tool to control the judiciary and administration with the explicit authority to intervene in the legislative branch only in limited circumstances. Consequently, ombudsman office is inimical to rigorous ideas of separation of powers. However, the office can be considered consistent with Montesquieu's theories so far as the philosopher regarded the existence of certain authorities as a means of ensuring that the three major powers stay within their bounds. The Swedish progenitors, while ideology of the time was evident in the 1809 constitution, institutions that had developed in Sweden over the centuries before had an even greater influence on the provisions for an office of the ombudsman. Therefore, under various constitutions, the states of realms public representatives had regularly exercised authority over the government and civil administration. Example of such instance were when parliament had served as a court frequently in politically charged cases, and when the states had established specialized courts. However, the Ombudsman's office constituted a significant break from such approaches, manifesting incompatible with the reformist theory of the separation of powers and discredited due to the multiple abuses. Because the ombudsman was an officer elected by the parliament, he might bring legal actions against judges and officials on behalf of states. But the ordinary courts, mostly independent of parliament, would hear these cases. The latter factors has become less significant since the ombudsman had gained its sanctions. However, this evolution has coincided with the emergence of a new theory according to which the separation of power is not an effective at the protecting civil liberties as institutions like ombudsman. The ombudsman post was not without the historical precedence, albeit a divergence from various mechanisms for direct parliamentary scrutiny of the administration. The framers' ideas probably originated with the plebs and tribunes of the classical Rome. The role of justice in the medieval kingdom of Argonne was to defend common people from the official abuses of law. Swedish intellectuals of the 18th century was familiar with the monarchic treaties of the 16th century, which advocate similar system. It appears even more likely that an attorney general, a domestic official whose office had no longer been a part of royal administration, had and who had the authority to supervise judges and other officials in the application of new law, served as a model for the unique characteristics of the office of civil ombudsman. Furthermore, while the attorney general has traditionally served in the executive part of the government as he does now, it's interesting to remember that on rare occasions in 18th century parliament was able to exert some influence over the positions. As a result, the attorney general was compelled to report to the states in 1739. Parliament had the authority to select someone to the positions from 1766 until 1772. Simultaneously, the Attorney General gained a part of independence that defines the Ombudsman's office by acquiring authority to determine when the file charges. However, with the Attorney General's reappointment as a royal appointee, it became evident that the public, especially the parliament, might suffer due to his dependent status. The reason behind Parliament's demand for its own ombudsman was who would be accountable solely to the Parliament and have autonomy over the appointment, salaries, and policies is likely due to this development. The ombudsman's establishment must be understood in Sudan's protracted transitions from continental absolutism or Anglo American parliamentarism to a society governed by law and marked by a bureaucracy. This system has yielded innovative and valuable outcomes in a number of fields, and it developed differently in the 18th century. As a result, the parliament has mandated that the ombudsman's main office and staffed by qualified individuals while he is away, and it has established guidelines for the submission and handling of complaints. The instructions technique has enabled parliament to change and broaden the ombudsman's remit because the Swedish constitution acts as the extremely difficult to modify. For instance, guidelines established the notion that the ombudsman would prioritize public security and officials' intention over legalistic regulations while acting as a prosecutor. It's even possible to argue that the parliament has utilized directives to give ombudsman permissions to act in ways that are very different from what the office founder intended. Therefore, an order allows the ombudsman to warn officials rather than bring charges against them. Elections and qualifications, as far as concerned, a special committee consisting of 48 members of the parliament is responsible for electing the ombudsman and his duty, and then it is deputed to term that lasts for a period of 4 years. It is not up uncommon for the same guys to retain their seats for the multiple terms. It is possible for either ombudsman to resign or be dismissed by the parliament at any point during his term of office. In the event that occurs, the ombudsman deputy will take over the positions until the parliament elect new ombudsman, at which point a new deputy will also be elected. During times when parliament is not in session, there is specific system that is in a place for the elections of a deputy legislators. The Constitution provides a straightforward explanations of the characteristics that are required of the civil and the military ombudsman. These criteria are known legal ability and outstanding integrity. It is all well known fact that eminent judges have typically been selected to perform the duties of the position. As far as jurisdiction is concerned, the two ombudsmen are tasked with the responsibility of overseeing the observance of the laws and statutes, and they carry out their duties in the capacity of representatives of parliament in accordance with the directives issued by the parliament. The ministry ombudsman is responsible for reviewing the administration of laws that pertain to military concern, and his name suggests. On the other hand, the civil ombudsman is responsible for overseeing the observance of laws and statutes as applied in all other matters by the courts and by public officials and employees. The ombudsmen are authorized to bring charges against those who, in the exercise of their official duties, have thorough partially favoritism or other cause committed any unlawful act or neglected to perform their official duties properly. In carrying out these functions, the ombudsmen are subject to all respects to the same responsibility and obligations as are prescribed for public prosecutors by general civil and criminal laws and laws of procedures. In the course of carrying out their responsibilities, the ombudsmen are permitted to observe the proceedings for any Swedish court or any administrative board that has been established to take the position of the appellate court. However, they are not permitted to contribute their opinions during these meetings. In the same manner, the ombudsmen have assessed the records of all administrative boards, public offices, and courts. It is within the scope of the civil ombudsman's duty to conduct inspections of institutions such as hospitals, jails, and other such establishment. Supervision of municipal government is concerned when we see that the state organization over which the ombudsman authority is limited by the constitution was thought to include local administrations, but in 1957 ombudsman jurisdictions were expanded to include them. However, parliament instructed the ombudsman to give the municipalities right to self administration, serious considerations while assigning him this significant new area of responsibility. We can only hope that a compromise has been reached between the ombudsman oversight of growing number of municipally performed governmental responsibilities and the desire for local self-government. Over his 3 years in this new role, the ombudsman had handled 280 cases involving just municipal officials from 58 in 1958 to 85 in 1960. The number has grown. The vast bulk of these instances include the Children's Welfare Act and the Alcoholic Act, both of which are highly enforceable by the local authorities and even include mandatory measures. The housing and construction policies of local government has been the ombudsman's other primary topic of concern. Expansion of government activities. The ombudsman does not have the authority to investigate or punish two main areas of the government activities which they are outside of its jurisdictions, and he does not have the necessary expertise to do so. The first issue pertaining to the government cooperations, which according to Swedish law are not deemed to organizations that are a part of government. The second and more significant worry is with the government itself. To put it another way, the ministers are not within the purview of the ombudsman because of the ministers in Sweden are not responsible for supervising the government's various administrative departments. This limitation is not significant in Sweden as it would be the most nations with a parliamentary system. Rather, the bureaucracy functions without being subject to the oversight of specific ministers, but it will still subject to the authority of the entire government administration. Therefore, the ombudsman has unambiguous jurisdiction over the highest officials who have the authority to determine a subject with the exceptions of certain instances in which an appeal from an administrative verdict can be carried out to the government. The principle that the government itself has the authority to hear appeals from the majority of the administrative decisions, however, places significant constraints of this power. The ombudsman is without a doubt barred from taking any further action until the government has officially decided of an appeal. But the what about his authority to take actions in the situation where the parties have not yet appealed to the government but still have the possibility to do so, particularly in a situation where it is clear what course of action the government will take in considering the appeal from the beginning. The earliest people to hold these positions appear to have occasionally leveled objections against administrative authorities who have acted in accordance with announcements made by the government or the probable wishes of the government. In doing so, they seem to have attempted to exert indirect control over the actions taken by the government. Later, ombudsmen, on the other hand, appear to have taken the opposite stance, taking care not to intervene against any administrative decisions until it was apparent that the subject would not be sent to the government. This was done in order to avoid any potential conflict of interest. Recently, however, there have been indications that the ombudsman is no longer under the impression that they are obligated to avoid confrontations with the government. Instead, they have shown that they are prepared to interfere in situations that can appeal to the government. As far as the procedure is concerned, there are two ways for ombudsman to notify about issues. First, he closely examines any issues pertaining to loss of liberty during his inspections of courts, prisons, and administrative agencies. In a similar view, we can say that they may learn of abuses from media. Second part is that the ombudsman gets informations from public complaints made by disgruntled individuals in addition to the cases he looks on as an needed basis. These complaints must be submitted in writing and, if visible, supported by necessary documents per the relevant guidelines. Ombudsman contacts the accountable officer to request informations or to clarify their actions when he determines to look into the complaint. It is the ombudsman's responsibility to hear the viewpoints of officials in higher authority, and all officials have an obligation to provide correct information to the ombudsman upon request. If the officials refuse, the ombudsman may file a complaint and request that a fine be imposed. The ombudsman may choose to take actions at all charges on officials whose conduct has been flawed or condemned the official directly or in his report in the parliament based on the facts that he gathered during inquiry. The ombudsman is not allowed to persecute any officials for any infractions without first offering him an opportunity to clarify his actions, which is the only restriction in his ability to choose sanctions. So, by going all this discussion, it has been said that it is obvious that the military and the civil ombudsman have gained an unchallenged status in the Swedish society. This has happened in the part because of the significant contributions these officers have made to the advancement of Swedish law and the defense of the civil liberties. However, office holders generally lucky choice have also had a significant role. It has been extremely beneficial that there has a pleasant rotations between forward thinking activity innovators and traditional administrators since his retirement. Typically well-being judges has been selected and they have distinguished themselves in holding the positions, though thankful no such restrictions has been ever been placed. There have been occasions when the idea of limiting the freedom of choice to allow only individuals outside the civil services and court to be nominated has been considered. It would be regrettable to impose such a restrictions to on the selection of such significant figures in a small nation, especially considering that the ombudsman have earned the trust and has been placed in them. Thank you.